Okay, let's dive into a political story that's got, well, all the twists and turns of a great drama, playing out in the vibrant state of Karnataka.
Oh, yeah. We're not talking tech or temples today, are we?
No, no, we're unpacking a saga right from the heart of its democracy, the Legislative Assembly.
That's right. We saw something pretty unprecedented. 18 elected representatives suspended.
Locked out for nearly 2 months.
And then, just like that, brought back into the fold. It's a story that involves fiery debates, literal paper throwing.
Serious allegations.
Yeah.
And a real high-stakes political standoff.
Mm-hmm.
It all kind of culminated around May 25th, 2025, with that unexpected reversal.
Yeah.
So our mission on this deep dive is really to understand the whole arc of this. What triggered that initial, dramatic moment.
What was going on during those 2 months? They were basically in political isolation.
And crucially, what finally led to them being allowed back in.
We'll try to connect the dots, the key dates, the central figures, the underlying issues.
To figure out what this whole episode tells us about the sometimes, well, raw and unpredictable dynamics inside a legislative house.
Definitely.
I mean, think about it. You've got elected representatives, symbols of democratic representation, physically removed.
Yeah. And then allegations flying about things like honey traps.
And those controversial quotas. A direct clash with the speaker's authority.
Appeals going all the way up to the governor's office.
Legal battles brewing in the background. And then suddenly a change of heart. It's quite a lot to untangle.
It really is. And it's more than just, procedural rules. It's about power, protest, and pushing boundaries within the system.
So let's rewind. Where did this all kick off?
We need to go back to March 21st, 2025.
Okay.
Supposedly the final day of the Karnataka Legislative Assembly's budget session.
You'd expect things to be winding down, maybe some final speeches.
Mm-hmm.
But that day, the atmosphere was anything but calm.
Oh, far from it. Forget the idea of a quiet temple of democracy. This was pure political theater.
Right.
The tension was, well, you could feel it. And things escalated incredibly fast.
And at the center of this storm, a specific group, right?
Yeah.
18 MLAs from the BJP.
Yep, those 18. And they weren't just, shouting from their seats. Their actions went way beyond verbal protest.
They took it to a level that clearly crossed the line for the speaker.
They certainly made their protest physical. Reports described them actually climbing onto the speaker's podium.
Wow. The podium itself.
Yeah, a hugely symbolic act, challenging the chair's authority, tearing up official documents.
And then, this is the bit that gets me, flinging the shredded paper around the chamber.
Astonishingly, yes.
Can you just picture that? Paper flying everywhere?
It sounds like, I don't know, confetti at a really bad wedding.
Or like those descriptions, like 18 toddlers having a collective tantrum in a supermarket aisle. Just chaos.
It was a massive breach of parliamentary decorum, no question, and Speaker U.T. Khader's reaction showed that. He called their behavior unpardonable.
That's strong language from the chair.
Very strong. And the response was immediate. A resolution was proposed right then and there.
And passed.
Passed on the floor. To suspend all 18 of them. Not for a day or a week.
But 6 months. A huge chunk of time.
A very significant period. And their removal wasn't exactly dignified.
What happened?
Marshals were called in. The MLAs were physically carried out of the assembly hall.
Physically carried out, you mean like lifted and removed?
That's how it's described. It just adds another layer of drama to the whole scene, doesn't it?
It really does. Imagine elected representatives being hoisted out like sacks of rice, as some put it.
It underlines the level of disruption and, I guess, the speaker's determination to enforce that suspension.
And the consequences weren't just being kicked out of the room for the day.
No, it was serious. They were barred from attending any committee meetings, couldn't go on official legislative tours.
And even lost their daily allowances.
Even the allowances. It was complete sidelining, effectively.
And this wasn't just a few backbenchers. We're talking prominent figures here, right?
Absolutely. People like the BJP chief whip, Dodanagarda Patil, former Deputy Chief Minister C.N. Ashwath Narayan.
And others like S.R. Vishwanath, B.A. Basavaraju, Munaratna, names people would recognize.
Exactly. Silencing that many voices, especially senior ones, is a pretty big deal in any legislature.
It immediately shifts the political dynamics, I imagine.
Completely.
So what exactly pushed them to that point? What were the core issues, the grievances so intense they led to, well, climbing the podium and throwing paper?
Right. We need to unpack the why. There seem to be two main issues the BJP was protesting very loudly about.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first was a very specific and definitely contentious policy, the 4% reservation for Muslims in certain government contracts.
Ah, right. This was under the Karnataka Transparency and Public Procurements Act, the KTPB Act.
Exactly. It reserved certain types of contracts up to 2 crore for civil works, 1 crore for goods and services for people in Category 2B.
Which includes Muslim community.
Yes. And the opposition, the BJP, framed this immediately and very sharply.
How did they frame it?
They called it blatant appeasement. They argued it was unconstitutional, and this was the key part of their argument, that it took opportunities away from other communities.
I remember some really charged language around this. Did they make claims that this policy could lead to Muslims dominating contracts in certain areas, like wildly high percentages?
That claim was definitely made. There was talk of potentially 75% dominance in places like Mangaluru. Now, whether that specific figure was, let's say, an accurate forecast or more political hyperbole.
Right, designed to stir up opposition.
Possibly. But the core argument resonated with their base, that this policy unfairly favored one community, and that sparked significant outrage within the BJP ranks.
Okay, so that's one major flashpoint. What was the second issue fueling the fire?
The other big one was an alleged honey trap scandal. This bomb was dropped by Cooperation Minister K.N. Rajana.
What did he claim?
He made a really shocking claim, actually, that up to 48 politicians, and allegedly this included central leaders, maybe even judges, had been caught in some kind of organized scheme.
Wow. And a honey trap, just for clarity, is basically setting someone up.
Right.
Luring them into a compromising situation.
Often intimate, yeah.
To blackmail or coerce them later.
Exactly. It sounds like something out of a spy thriller, but here it was being painted as a very real, very dangerous political nightmare. Imagine the leverage that gives someone.
Absolutely terrifying for those involved.
Yeah.
So how did the BJP react to these allegations?
Predictably, they demanded a high-level investigation. Specifically, they wanted a judicial probe or the CBI involved.
Implying they didn't trust a state-level inquiry run by the current government.
Pretty much. And they didn't just talk about it. In the assembly, they were apparently waving CDs around.
Waving CDs. Claiming they had evidence.
Claiming they held proof related to this alleged scandal. It certainly added a visual, almost theatrical element to their protest.
What was the chief minister's response to all this?
Chief Minister Siddaramaiah said he would order a high-level probe. But, and this is key, only if a formal complaint was actually filed.
Ah, okay. So put up or shut up, essentially.
Kind of. And the opposition clearly felt that wasn't good enough, given the seriousness of the claims and the supposed evidence they had. That dissatisfaction combined with the anger over the reservation policy.
Seemed to be the cocktail that exploded on March 21st.
Exactly. That seems to be what ignited those really dramatic scenes.
So the suspension happens, dramatic exit, but that wasn't the end, was it? It was really just the start of a, nearly 2-month standoff.
That's right. The BJP wasn't just going to accept this. They immediately went on the offensive, labeling the suspension undemocratic.
Leaders like the state president B.Y. Vijayendra and the leader of opposition R. Ashoka were pretty vocal.
Very vocal. They accused Speaker Khader of basically acting under the ruling Congress party's influence, even calling him a stooge. Strong words.
And their argument was that their MLAs weren't actually disrespecting the speaker's chair itself, but were making a necessary, forceful protest.
Yeah, they tried to frame it as defending constitutional values, standing up for their constituents. I even saw a comment from former Chief Minister Jagadish Shettar, who suggested the protest was, in his view, peaceful.
Peaceful might be stretching it a bit, given the podium climbing and paper throwing.
It might be a generous interpretation, yes, but it shows how the BJP was trying hard to reframe the narrative around the incident.
And they didn't just stick to verbal attacks, did they? They made strategic moves.
Definitely. They took concrete steps to put pressure on the government and the speaker.
Like escalating it, taking it to a higher authority.
Precisely. Step one was appealing directly to the Karnataka governor, Thawarchan Gehlot.
Okay.
Around April 28, 2025, they submitted a formal memorandum. They argued their protest was misinterpreted, the suspension was an overreach, and crucially, it was affecting their constituents' representation.
And did the governor respond? Did that have any impact?
He did respond. Governor Gehlot actually wrote letters to both Chief Minister Siddaramaiah and Speaker Khader.
What did he say?
He basically emphasized the importance of democratic principles and, well, implicitly urged them to reconsider the lengthy suspension. Getting a nudge from the governor like that definitely adds weight to the opposition's case.
Okay, so pressure from the governor. What else? They threatened legal action too, right?
Oh, absolutely. That was a big one. The BJP was actively gearing up to challenge the suspension in court.
On what grounds?
They pointed to a really significant Supreme Court ruling from 2022 involving a similar situation in Maharashtra.
What did that ruling say?
It found that long-term suspensions like this were unconstitutional, partly because they effectively disenfranchise the constituencies those suspended MLAs represent. You're silencing the voice of thousands of voters.
That's a powerful argument.
It is. And by mid-May 2025, it was clear they were serious. MLA Aravind Belad publicly questioned if the speaker even had the authority to suspend members beyond the current session. They were ready for a legal fight.
So they were hitting them from all sides. Political attacks, the governor's intervention, and a credible legal threat based on precedent.
Exactly. All while those 18 MLAs were still out in the cold, no sessions, no committees, no allowances.
And didn't the BJP do something else, like boycotting committees?
Yes, that was another tactic. They started boycotting standing committee meetings, including important ones like the Public Accounts Committee, basically grinding some legislative work to a halt.
The old, if we can't play properly, we'll slow the whole game down approach.
Pretty much. It just highlighted how disruptive the whole standoff had become.
Which brings us finally to that unexpected twist on May 25th, 2025.
The U-turn.
After all that buildup, all that tension, the speaker suddenly announces the suspension is revoked. What was the official line? Why the change?
Well, before the public announcement, Speaker Khader held a pretty crucial meeting.
Who was there?
Top brass. Chief Minister Siddharamaiah, Deputy CM D.K. Shivakumar, Law Minister H.K. Patil, and significantly, the leader of opposition, R. Ashoka.
Ah, so Ashoka was in the room, a bipartisan huddle at the highest level.
Definitely a sign that a deal was being worked out. Officially, according to Speaker Khader, the main reasons for revoking the suspension were twofold.
Okay, what were they?
First, he said the MLAs had expressed regret for their actions. Specifically, they apparently clarified they hadn't intended to disrespect the speaker's chair itself.
Right, so an expression of remorse was cited. That's convenient timing.
A little convenient, perhaps. And second, he noted that the long suspension was genuinely hindering them from doing their jobs, serving constituents, participating in committees.
So the argument was keeping them out was actually bad for the democratic process itself.
That was the official rationale, that it was hindering their ability to serve and participate in vital legislative work.
Okay, those are the stated reasons. But come on, surely there were other, maybe more powerful forces at play here. Remorse alone, after nearly 2 months of digging their heels in, seems unlikely to be the whole story.
Oh, absolutely. While regret might have been expressed, you've got to look at the pressures that had built up.
Like the governor's letter.
The governor's letter added constitutional weight. Then there was the legal threat that was very real. Losing in court, based on the Supreme Court precedent, would have been politically embarrassing for the government and the speaker.
Definitely.
And you can bet there was likely pressure from senior party leaders, maybe even from Delhi, from figures like Union Ministers Prahlad Joshi or Shobha Karandlaje, who wanted this resolved.
And what about timing? The political calendar?
That's almost certainly a factor, too. The monsoon session was on the horizon, expected in July 2025.
Right.
The ruling party probably didn't want to walk into a new session with the opposition united and still fired up about their colleagues being suspended. It's better to clear the decks, right?
Avoid handing them an easy issue to rally around from day one.
Exactly. Starting a fresh session with this unresolved conflict simmering, strategically that's not ideal. Resolving it lets everyone try for a reset, even if it's just temporary.
I heard Speaker Khader was quite diplomatic when asked about whether external pressure forced his hand.
Yes, he chose his words very carefully. He said something like, no one can directly interfere in the speaker's decision, but then added that suggestions and requests can be made, and he'd taken them positively.
Which sounds like acknowledging input without admitting he was pushed.
Precisely. A typical political tightrope walk. He even threw in some lighter comments, calling the MLAs friends, not enemies, and saying their actions were just a fit of the moment.
A fit of the moment. That's quite a way to downplay climbing the podium and showering the place with paper.
It certainly reframes the event in hindsight, doesn't it? Ultimately, the public framing was about upholding parliamentary ethics while allowing the MLAs back without further embarrassment to do their jobs.
And just so we're clear, the decision was announced. They're effectively back as of May 25th. But the formal rubber stamp happens in the next assembly session.
That's the procedure, yes. But for all practical purposes, the 2-month exile ended then and there.
This whole saga, the initial explosion, the long standoff, the sudden resolution, it really makes you step back and think, doesn't it? About how democracy actually works, or sometimes doesn't work smoothly in the real world.
Absolutely. It throws that balance into sharp relief, the opposition's vital role they have to protest, challenge, hold the government accountable.
But then there's the flip side.
Yeah.
The absolute need for order, for decorum, for respecting the institutions themselves, like the speaker's chair. It's a symbol.
Exactly. Is climbing onto that podium and throwing papers ever okay? Most people would instinctively say no, that's crossing a line. It disrespects the whole process.
But then from the opposition's view, if they feel there's serious concerns like the reservation policy or these explosive honey trap claims are just being ignored or stonewalled.
How forcefully can they protest before it just becomes obstruction? Where is that line?
And that Supreme Court ruling from 2022 adds another layer. It specifically warned against these super long suspensions precisely because they silence representation.
Right. It's not just about punishing the MLA. It's about the voters who elected them being left without a voice in the assembly. It creates this real tension between internal discipline and the core principle of representation.
And let's be honest, this whole thing was also pure political strategy, wasn't it?
Oh, textbook. The BJP used the reservation issue, the honey trap claims, to energize their base, painting the Congress as, anti-Hindu or maybe soft on corruption.
Well, the Congress fired back, accusing the BJP of just manufacturing chaos, creating drama to distract from the government's actual work and achievements.
It's that classic political ping-pong match, isn't it? Both sides using the conflict to score points, shape the narrative. Sometimes the actual substance of the issues gets a bit lost in the noise.
So the 18 MLAs are back. What happens next? All eyes on the monsoon session in July 2025.
That's the big question mark, isn't it? Will their return mean things calm down, a return to more standard parliamentary behavior? Or are the underlying tensions just going to bubble up again?
Speaker Khader sounded optimistic, talking about a new chapter. But let's face it, politics in Karnataka can be unpredictable.
Like Bengaluru weather, maybe? Sunny 1 minute, pouring the next?
Exactly. And crucially, as you said, the core issues that started this whole fire haven't actually gone away.
That's the key point. The BJP has already said they're not dropping the fight against that 4% Muslim quota. They'll continue opposing it, inside the assembly and outside.
So that fuse is still lit. And what about the honey trap scandal?
Well, that's still dangling, isn't it? Remember, the chief minister's promise of a probe hinged on Minister Rajana filing a formal complaint.
Which, as far as we know, hasn't happened yet.
Not as far as reports indicate. So until or unless that happens, the whole honey trap allegation remains this kind of political hot potato.
Ready to be tossed back into the ring whenever the opposition wants to raise the temperature.
Precisely. So the return of the MLAs doesn't magically resolve the underlying conflicts. It just changes the venue where they'll likely play out. The drama isn't over. Maybe it's just entering the next act.
So stepping back from the day-to-day of Karnataka politics, what's the big takeaway from this whole deep dive?
I think for me, it's a really powerful reminder that democracy, especially in a place as vibrant and contested as India, is rarely neat. It's not always polite.
It's often messy, it's loud.
And yeah, sometimes frustrations boil over to the point where papers fly and people get carried out. It shows that constant friction, doesn't it?
Between the need for robust protest and the need to keep the institutions functioning with some dignity, Speaker Khader's decision, driven by that mix of remorse, pressure, and timing, brought them back.
But as we've laid out, it absolutely sets the stage for more debates, more potential protests, maybe more drama down the line.
Ultimately, this story, it's more than just political news from one state. It's kind of a window into the often chaotic, definitely passionate, and sometimes, frankly, absurd reality of democratic politics in action.
And it leaves you, the listener, with a really fundamental question to chew on, I think. In the heat of these political battles, where is that line for our elected representatives? How do they balance their duty to fight for what they believe is right, to protest injustice, with their responsibility to actually uphold the integrity and the smooth running of the democratic institutions they serve?
That's a tough balance.
It is. And it's a question that echoes far beyond Karnataka, really. It's central to how healthy democracies function or struggle to function everywhere.